You're listening to the Minnesota Progressive Repartee, a show about... Wait, repartee? Is that a word? Is that what I was supposed to say? The heck is repartee?
It means lively banter, intro guy.
All right, you're listening to the Minnesota Progressive Repartee. Whatever. Hosted by Doug Padgett, Brett Johnson, and Hunter Hawes.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Repartee. Doug Padgett in. It's Friday, so that often means that we're joined by the polymath himself, astrophysicist Paul Wallace. And Paul,
hi Doug.
I refer to you as a polymath because, as you reminded me, it's Galileo's birthday today. He was also a polymath. So
it is.
I didn't know if
Galileo
I should wish you a happy Galileo's birthday, a happy post Valentine's Day glow, or a happy Emperor Trump Day. I think they all sort of fit. The day
let's go for the first. Let's go for the first two. Let's have 30 Trump-free minutes. Just 30 Trump-free minutes. It'll leave everybody feeling better about life.
That's right. To get their eyes out of and their ears out of all that nonsense. And
let's go with the first two.
Yeah, we'll go to something else. So a couple of reasons why it's interesting that on our little Friday conversation we talk about all things interesting when it comes to the space and sky and all the rest of it. Partly that it's Galileo's birthday, and Galileo was an interesting guy.
Yeah, he'd be 455 years old if he were still alive.
Boy, that would have been that'd be weird, wouldn't it? I got to tell you, this Galileo character, he had quite the PR group around him in the early 1600s to take all of his ideas and like keep him afloat when the church was against him, other astronomers were against him. He had some sort of a real serious brand running at the time.
Yeah, well, he was his best promoter. He was a total promoter.
Is that right?
Mr. Marketer. Yeah, his first book. He wrote when he published his first big observations. They were all in Italian, and that was like against the rules. It was supposed to all be done in Latin, but he did it in Italian so all the normal people could read it. All the non-scholars could read it, and his observations were so simple that everybody could get it. And so he promoted. He was like the first science popularizer.
Well, that's interesting because I didn't know those particular details, but just reading his Wikipedia page, which is where I learn all these things, it was like, wow, people sure know an awful lot about this guy. For a period of time in which the people that are doing the kind of work that he was doing, being all the different expertise that a guy like Galileo had, where he was an astronomer, an engineer, a physicist. He was studying speed and velocity and gravity. Like most people, they would have no access to a guy like Galileo.
Nope. Nope.
But then he's super famous and put a lot of leverage on both science and the church, and of course that period of time, religion and science were maybe more deeply embraced in their dance than they might be than we might think about how they are today.
Yeah, I think so. And the popular storyline on Galileo. It kind of says that the two religion and science are fundamentally and naturally enemies, and that's probably not really true. If you actually look at the history closely, you'll see that it was a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point for the two of us because both of us, when we're in addition to our day jobs on Friday from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Minnesota's Progressive Repartee. We both have our feet in other things. You're a working scientist and a professor. I'm a pastor of a church and run a national organization trying to save the country from Donald Trump. And but we're also both religious people and work in religious contexts.
That's true. Yeah.
And you had this interesting little post on Facebook the other day, which read something like, the church people in my life are more interested in my science than my science friends are interested in my church life.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. Tell the people who don't know about what a polymath like you is doing, both teaching, being an astronomer, being a radio personality, and working in a church there and outside of Atlanta. Tell them a bit about that and what the church role is that you have and what that's about.
Yeah, well, I'm a physics professor, and in the past I did science. I did science professionally. I was a researcher, but now I kind of write, and I also am a sort of it's a part-time job, but I'm a pastor for adult education. So I'm not like the guy who preaches every week. I do preach occasionally, but I do work at a church here in Decatur, Georgia, on the pastoral staff, and I'm ordained and I'm a minister and all that stuff too.
Doing adult education, meaning you know how to run the overhead projectors, and you're responsible for a cart that has a television and a VCR on the cart that rolls around on big wheels.
I got a buddy named Randall who manages that for me, but I just I do the awesome. Teaching. I do a lot of teaching over there.
So yeah, well, I mean, I'm sort of joking about you being a polymath, and I looked up the definition of a polymath because Galileo is often considered one, and the quickie definition is that it's a person whose expertise spans a significant number of subject areas, known to draw complex bodies of knowledge to solve particular problems. And it's curious because we live in a world in which now the expert is highly esteemed, and we've just chosen in our society to really lean into people with specialties and expertise. And occasionally we let someone be sort of a superhero across the disciplines, an Elon Musk type person. But it's kind of curious, and I wonder how much you feel like all the disciplines you're involved in. You're in education, you're in science, you're in community formation and religion, and that. All of those, obviously, in your life as a Galileo type character here on his birthday, you see some connection between all of that, where others,
I do,
would think, hey, let's have everybody stay in their lane. Know your thing. Right. Don't mix your foods. And it kind of reminds me of those, of the kids that don't like their food to touch on their plate, so they like the lunchroom trays where they have a compartment for everything. That's sort of a little ridge.
Isn't that song back in the 90s, Keep Them Separated, something like that? I can't remember who that was, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. No, I really do see them as all sort of just kind of one world, and these are just different faces of the world of the same reality. I think people try to. I have a hard time boxing up my life into separate compartments. I really, really cannot function that way. So I keep the two pretty well mixed up. Talking about my faith life, my religious life, and my professional sort of science and teaching kind of life. I keep it's all in one big ball in my mind.
So I get it. You kind of made this little joke about that the people at church are super interested in your religious or your scientific life. Do you what do you think leads to that makes both religious people super interested in science right now, and maybe the converse too, if that's also true, that some of the people in more of our hard sciences aren't so interested. But it is curious that I've found the same thing as a religious person working in religion fields. People are really interested in science. Like you start talking about that, and they're like, "Oh, now that's interesting to me." There's a lot of hunger within spiritual communities for the the more
absolutely. I think there's a real spiritual dimension to science, to the act of doing it, and even to sort of the vision that you get that science has produced for us. I think it all has very deep spiritual resonances. But part of the thing, of course, is that you and I both sort of live and breathe in more progressive religious circles, and so there's not the kind of backlash against science that you might find in more fundamentalist or far right churches. That just doesn't happen. People are always interested, and I think most people, at least in my church and in other churches I connect with, are just hungry to know about it because they see that there's a connection between the two, and they want to understand it and explore it themselves. On the other side, I think scientists, for the most part, more or less just ignore religious stuff.
Yeah.
And some of that, and there's a good reason. I mean, there's a lot more people in churches than there are scientists, and most scientists have some religion in their background, but very few religious people have science in their background. So people who are scientists oftentimes have their own personal stories of religion, and oftentimes they're not comfortable ones. And so it's hard for them to bring it up, in casual conversation, because it's kind of a touchy topic with a lot of people. I didn't grow up, I didn't have any negative religious experiences growing up. I grew up in a church that loved me, so I have no heavy baggage as far as negative personal experiences go. But a lot of people do.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where is that church? Where is that church where a kid can grow up without a lot of baggage? I've heard that church exists somewhere. Was it there? Was it over there in Georgia?
I mean, heavy like emotional
No,
baggage.
I get you.
Yeah, I've had to let go of some theological baggage, but
right.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, these days churches like that are few and far between. But
yeah, and
they do exist, as you know.
And just to be fair too, and I'm sure you'll say this on the science side. There's a famous science philosopher. I think his last name is Kuhns. Max Kuhn?
Yeah.
Max Kuhn, is that right? Do I have the name right? Something like that. But he's famous for saying that science changes one funeral at a time. And he's trying to make the argument that within science there's an awful lot of dogma that stays held pretty tightly by the people.
It's a conservative. It's conservative, and there are people who have their whole career staked on certain ideas. And they could be wrong. And so, yeah, they're human beings. Scientists have the same emotional drivers that everybody else has. I mean,
right. They're bought in. They're bought in, and they've got a lot riding on it, and we all do. And that explains an awful lot of things. Hey, that's astrophysicist Paul Wallace, the polymath. He's going to hang on over the break. We hope you do too, and give us a call if you have questions for him, for me, for Galileo. We'll answer Galileo questions. 952-946-6205. And we'll be back here after the break on Minnesota's Progressive Repartee.
Hi, Minnesota. It's Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Minnesota Progressive Repartee on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah, people all over the country are starting to understand the word repartee in a whole new way. And we're back on the repartee with me, Doug Padgett, and with Brett, who's back fresh from California. Brett, how was your vacation, by the way? Do you get to call it a vacation, or do you call it just a trip?
It was a vacation, and relatively speaking, it was cold for Palm Springs. It was only in the low to mid-60s, but still better than here, though, temperature-wise, yeah. But if you heard, though, they got rain. My parents are still there, and they've had rain for like the past 24 hours, and it's really nasty. There's floods everywhere.
I didn't know that.
Kind of brutal there, yeah.
Well, I sure hope there's not the need to call any kind of a federal emergency because, all the money is now being sucked away. And
I never even thought of that, but that's actually true, yeah.
Spent by a crazy person. We're going to talk about that after the break, or after the conversation here with astrophysicist, educator, and churchman Paul Wallace, a polymath of his own right. Here on Galileo's birthday, the day after Valentine's Day, both these sort of mid-centuries highlighted days by accomplishments of European men. And, our very own Emperor Trump Day, the day when the President of the United States decided to become an emperor or dictator, just like all the rest of them. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Well, we'll ask the Republicans what they'll do here in a minute. But for now, Brad from Robbinsdale who often has a question for you, astrophysicist Paul Wallace. He has one today. Hey, Brad, thanks for listening and thanks for the call.
Yes, I saw this flyer around my neighborhood. Wanted, dead or alive, Schrodinger's cat. And I'm just wondering if you could actually explain what the relevance of this. I've been always mystified and what insights it provides.
That's hilarious, Brad.
You have some very clever neighbors, and I think that if you read that sign closely, it would say "wanted, dead, and alive," not "or." Right? It says "dead and."
Okay.
So basically, a guy named Erwin Schrödinger thought that thought that certain aspects of quantum mechanics were wrong. And one thing that quantum mechanics, which is the science of the super tiny, says is that objects can be in two states at once. And that that might not make sense, but Schrodinger basically didn't like it and said that's as ridiculous as saying that a cat in a box can be both dead and alive until you look at the cat, and then the cat is either one or the other. But when the cat's in the box and the box is closed, it's dead and alive at the same time. That's what electrons do.
Well,
They're
that
in
sounds
two
something
states
like
at one
Thomas
time.
Aquinas, where. Well,
go ahead, Brad.
I'm here.
Oh, yes. It sounds something like Thomas Aquinas, where he talks that fire is hot because it has the principle of heat. But again, it could also be, radiating cold energy as well. So, I mean, I am still mystified, and it seems, almost just, I see no important revelation from it. It just seems obvious that, it could be either dead and alive.
Well, you need to know that it was basically Schrodinger's point was that this particular part of quantum mechanics was as nonsensical as that idea of a cat being both dead and alive simultaneously. So it was not meant to show that this is really the way things are, although we think that's really how they are now. But at the time, his point was the world can't be like that. That's ridiculous.
I get it. So Schrodinger, in an argument with other quantum physicists, said this idea that you all are presenting of quantum physics can't be true because it would be as ridiculous as this. And then over time, people are like, well, actually, the problem with quantum physics is that is kind of the way it is. Things are in whatever state they're in until they're observed, and the role and the act of the observer is what dictates which of those two states, which is where you get some of the science fiction stuff about like multiverses and things existing in more than one state at a time, or some of the mythical narratives of shapeshifters kind of play into this. They utilize the ideas that are found in that part of science to.
Yeah, that's right. It's all related.
Yeah. So
okay,
hey,
well, I'm still mystified.
I love it.
I'll just go back.
I love it, Brad. Brad's making a fantastic other little quip. Brad, you are a perfect fit for the repartee. I hope you will be at the Blue State Ball. Hey, Paul, I haven't even invited you to this. I don't even know if it's possible, but the AM 950 community has a blowout once a year. It's called the Blue State Ball. And speaking of a time when you see people in multiple states, over the course of the night, you'll see people in a variety of states of ecstasy over the course of this night, with the dancing and the hanging around and the libations. But if you happen to be in Minnesota on March 2nd, or if you have a reason to come, that's the weekend, and you come.
That's the one, huh?
You could come
coming up soon.
Yeah, it's coming up soon. So if you need to get up here for a little taste of the Great White North. That would be the weekend to come. And we hope all the listeners, Brad and any of the regulars or regular listeners and frequent callers, we sure hope that you'll join us over there.
So it's not a repartee, but could we classify it as a soiree?
It is great. It is our soiree. Yes.
All right.
Hey, I also wanted to ask you, and we only have 2 minutes left, so there's not a lot of time for this yet, but I sent you a little note about how they figured out why we see the northern lights the way we do, and it has to do with, I don't really get it, but it has to do with electrons that are coming in and then hitting the electromagnetic field. And I have the
Earth is like a big magnet.
Yeah, long ago. I mean, people talk a lot about magnetism, and there's a lot of like spirituality and sort of the way humans give energy and receive energy back, right? All this kind of stuff. And we use the I guess it's the metaphor of magnetism, part maybe because science has sort of given us that category.
It's the attraction business.
Yeah,
you get a couple magnets, how they fit together and stick together.
Yeah,
it's invisible force, between them,
And I guess what I've heard, what I've thought, is some level of elements. Okay, so let me step back one step. When people talk about this, when they're referring to human relationships, the attraction or the repelling or something. They're using magnetism as sort of a metaphor for like why I'm attracted.
Right.
Or they would, some of them I know would suggest maybe not. Maybe there is actually something that the human life gives, and maybe there's some set of receptors that give and receive and all this. But when it comes to the Earth and electrons coming from the sun, now you're not talking about a metaphor. You're talking about there's literally some kind of a gigantic magnet that runs between the North and the South Pole. Is that right? Do I have that right? And
yes, it's like a big bar magnet.
And who studies this? What do you call the people who study magnetism? Is that a separate discipline, or is it all tied together inside?
No,
of physics?
no, that would be a branch of physics. But people who study would be geologists, earth scientists, people like that would study the magnetic field of the Earth. Yeah, which is quite a complicated thing, and does provide us a couple of things. One is it helps us survive because it blocks a lot of radiation from space. It also provides us with the nice northern and southern lights.
And it seems like that's an enormous energy source that, if could ever be tapped into, might have some kind of a real doozy.
It's actually not that much energy, and it's spread out over a lot of space. So it's not as much energy as you might think.
Apparently not.
I mean, if you added it all up, it would be. But the sun, man, the sun is the thing. You want energy? That's the place to get it.
Go to the sun. Now I don't know if you're being a scientist or a preacher on Sundays. I don't know if that was your
Oh, I took my students to physics church today.
Did you really?
Church because they didn't do so well in their first exams, so I had to sort of preach a little bit.
Okay, yeah, had to fire them up. Didn't know if you were being a locker room coach or a preacher or an educator or a scientist.
It all kind of runs together, like I said.
Well, hey, thanks for being a part of our progressive repartee here in the afternoons on Fridays. Astrophysicist, polymath, Paul Wallace. Hey, all the rest of you, stick with us. We'll talk a little bit about Trump, and we'll do a little bit of update on the quiz of the news and all the rest of our Friday regulars on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota.
Hi, this is Paul Metza from the Wallow Power Radio Hour. You are about to hear my buddies, the Cool Cats, Hunter, Doug, and Brett, the Minnesota Progressive Repartee. Tune in and check those dudes out.
And you've done exactly that. Thanks for tuning in. 4:35 here on Friday, February 15th. Middle of the month, in the middle of the winter months. We're halfway home. That's how I feel, Brett. I don't know about you, but I feel like we're halfway home. And
with all this snow we're getting out there, it feels like we're a third of the way through, maybe a quarter.
This has been a kicker of a winter. I mean, it's fighting back. It came in a little soft. There was no snow, and it was kind of quiet. And then, man, this snowing every day. And I'm not a fan of the snow. I've tried in my later years here to stop complaining about it, but I am no fan of it. It's it wears me out. But I feel like we're halfway through. And I will just say that feels an awful lot like the Trump presidency right now. I don't think there's a chance he's going to win re-election, so I am counting us as more than halfway through. He made his big announcement today that he's going to establish a national emergency category so that he can override the structure of a constitutional government with 3 equal branches of government, by which the Congress, starting with the House of Representatives, holds, as they say, the purse strings, the money. And so normally the House of Representatives and Senators, Congress, has to come together to figure out how they're going to spend money. And then the president has to set a series of agenda items and decisions about how the president wants to see the president's objectives and desires, how they're going to interface with that. And that has to be negotiated. What Donald Trump is proposing that he do is specifically to claim the category of national emergency, as you all know, so that he can then turn around and spend money in a way that Congress, both the 2 previous Congress under his administration and now this 2019 Congress, specifically said we do not want to spend money on those things. And that move. Now, look, there are times when a president has to call a national emergency. It's probably a reasonable category to have. And you might know that when a president declares like something to be a federal disaster area, what that does is triggers then the release of monies to be able to be used in ways that are different than they would normally be used. The idea that after 2.5 years of negotiating with Congress to spend a certain amount of money on a particular project, the president doesn't get that, then decides to use this other tactic. I don't think that's at all what's intended in the use of the national emergency powers, and I'm sure it's going to be fought against. Here's the larger point. And now after 2.5 years of paying attention to Donald Trump as the nominee, as the candidate-elect, president-elect rather, and now the president, so since November 7th, 2016, it's pretty clear that the president of the United States is going to do the things that he said in his campaign. And it is shocking to me how many Republicans and progressives continue to act as if the president might not actually do those things. He's going to do them. Now, they're bad ideas. He's incompetent in executing them. They're damaging to the country. But there is no sense that this guy is not going to do them. So the next time a candidate runs and is making wild-ass promises to the community of the United States, and we just say, oh, those are just campaign promises. Those are just campaign statements. All the presidents are the same. It doesn't matter who you elect. They're all going to do the same thing. Be reminded, and progressive friends, remind all your other progressive friends that the cost of having someone who's making wild-eyed promises be the president of the United States is they will enact those. And if they don't enact them by the normal constructs of our federal process, they will enact them by other process. They'll do them. This is one of the things about campaign promises. Now, I think as a society, we should say just because a candidate makes a promise and that candidate wins election does not give that person the right to execute every promise they ever made, especially on this one, because Donald Trump is a lion secca of blowhardery because his promise was, I think I heard this, he may have only said it a time or 200, we're going to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it. Pretty clear you can drop half the promise. Brett, you know what it would be like? It would be like saying to your date, I promise I'm going to take you out to a fantastic meal over at Ocean Air for your birthday. Then, and I'm treating. And then birthday rolls around and you take the person over to Wendy's and you buy a cheeseburger and you say, actually, you're going to have to pay for your own cheeseburger. But I took you to dinner. I fulfilled the promise. When the promise entails this is what you're going to get and this is who's going to pay for it, and then you get something else and you end up paying for it, to consider that a promise fulfilled? So the president will lie, make those promises, and then fulfill as much of them by damaging this country as they possibly can. This is part of the reason why I don't think it's a good idea for any of our candidates to be making overinflated promises. And candidates are doing it. There's this philosophy in politics. It's a philosophy of leadership, which says, don't ask for a half a loaf. Ask for the full loaf. Make these huge promises. And then if you only fulfill half of the promise, well, people are still better. It's better off than having nothing. You should because what that does is it creates an impression that politicians just say things, that politicians just make promises, that politicians just lie about things. So they think, well, he's not actually going to ever do it. There's no way this is really something that's going to be done. This is not how it's actually going to go. And then you get some sort of an emperor-like personality like Donald Trump. And he's going to actually do that stuff. You just think about what he promised in his campaign. Now, he bluffed people on who was going to pay for it, of course, because he is a charlatan. But the thing that he wants is a monument to say that immigrants in this country should be feared. That's what he promised. That's what he's trying to build. So when we think vote for whomever, kind of doesn't matter, or let people sort of make big promises, we all need to grow up a little bit when it comes to the seriousness of the promises that we made and the actions of the presidency. It's an absolute disaster. And if Republicans continue to say things like, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a problem to me. Mitch McConnell, I'm going to support the president. I'm trying to do my Kentucky accent. I'm going to support the president. Well, he said yesterday, I'm going to support him in this declaration of a national emergency. Mitch McConnell, a guy who has made a career out of devaluing the presidency, said, I'm going to support the president. It's shameful. Mark, hold on. I want you to give the last word in this segment, so I want to hop into Randy here. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
I'm good. It's the other Randy, not the Brooklyn Park Randy. Anyway,
I understand, Randy.
I think you need to remember, though, that our fearless leader also promised wonderful, beautiful health care that was going to be much cheaper than what you're paying now, and it's going to cover everyone. You get to keep your doctor. It's going to be beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah, you're right.
So he made a lot of promises.
Yes.
And it's obvious that, the proof is endless. But yeah, it's amazing.
Well, thank you, Randy. Thanks, I appreciate that. It's truly amazing. I mean, he just wears you down, and it's just dumbfounding. He just makes you feel dumb. Hey, Mark, I know you've been holding on for a while, so I want to give you a full 2 minutes here.
You bet. Well, I just want to argue a little bit with your astrophysicist guy, because Nikola Tesla was up there with the world's smartest people on the planet ever,
Yeah.
and he was talking about developing energy out of the magnetosphere. And Nikola Tesla actually created, he invented the radio, he invented alternating current, and he developed free energy. All of his patents were bought up by J.P. Morgan.
Mm-hmm, I heard that, yeah.
And they were locked up and secured away. And J.P. Morgan said the only thing wrong with free energy is it's free.
Yeah, that's right.
But,
well, boy, you think about Tesla with energy, alternating current, and radio. That's pretty much AC/DC right there. Radio and AC.
Right.
Tesla, the precursor to the band AC/DC. All right.
And guys like Galileo and Michelangelo, they did that without technology. They didn't have quantum computers. They did it by observation. But let's jump on this Trump thing real quick, because the moron said today in the Rose Garden after his announcement that I really don't need to do this.
Yeah.
So how is it an emergency
if he
says he doesn't really need to do this? And again, if you judge, I have this thing that annoys people, especially politicians. I compare the things they say to the things they actually do. And when he was running his campaign and started in 2015, he attacked President Obama and Hillary Clinton about the debt and the deficit. And so he promised that he would use his business acumen to reduce the $18 trillion in debt, because he believes we're in a bubble. Well, right now, we just surpassed in excess of $22 trillion. So on his watch, last time I checked, 22 was much bigger than $18 trillion, and we're still looking at $122 trillion, $122 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So a million seconds is 13 days. A billion seconds is 31 years. A trillion seconds is 32,000 years. So we just.
So you're saying a trillion is a big number. That's a great way to say it. Take you from seconds to years to trillions. Hey, Mark, thanks for all your participation in the repartee. Hey, we're going to be back here after the break with a recap of the news via the news quiz. AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota, Minnesota Progressive repartee. And that very Tom Hartman, you can meet there on March 2nd over at the Blue State Ball. Where we, as the promo said, from blue jeans to ball gowns. Brett, what are you going to be wearing? Do you know? Do you already have an outfit? Set out in your mind?
I haven't decided quite yet. Probably somewhere in between formal and the jeans, I'm guessing.
I was thinking about mixing them together, like a little blue jeans and then a ball gown up top.
There you go. Yeah, party on one side, serious on the other.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, are you going to join us in Apple Valley? Are you going to join us at the Blue State Ball, my friend?
Well, I tell you what, you and
You guys should invite me and Randy to show up, and I'll wear my Make America Great hat. How about that?
I bet you don't have that hat, but you are invited, my friend. I sure hope you join us. All right, we've got to do the news. We got to do the news quiz, but you had a little comment about Trump names.
Yeah, I was listening to your comments about Donald Trump. You called him a charlatan, and
yes, a charlatan.
That he's damaging the country. And I'm really curious about that because the previous president also damaged our country. Now, he was a progressive, and Trump is anything but a progressive. So I just wanted a little clarity on the damage. What is he damaging? What's the damage being done?
I appreciate it, Patrick. Thanks for the call. I'm not going to have time to get into it too much because I got to get to this news quiz because it's my favorite part of Friday shows. But he's damaging the spirit, the reputation, and the overall sense of the institutions, including and most importantly, a sense of honoring the rule of law in the country. Now, look, you can say that Barack Obama did too, but I will just put this to you, Patrick. You can call me back on Monday. We'll talk about it. Is there anything you would say that Barack Obama did to damage the country that is not something that I would claim that Donald Trump has done? So let's have a president who doesn't damage the country if that's the case. And I think there's plenty of ways to have one of those. And I would say Barack Obama certainly did not. All right, news quiz. Here we go, Brett. We got to go quick. 10 questions. We have less than 7 minutes, and it's a hard stop, of course. All right.
Rapid fire time.
We got rapid fire. Senator Amy Klobuchar declared, this is from the Star Tribune, declared her intention to run for president of the United States this week. Where did she announce her candidacy? Washington, D.C., Minnesota Capitol, Fort Snelling, all would have been great choices, or Boom Island.
Well, we talked about the location. We didn't know where it was. Boom Island.
Boom Island. I'm glad you knew that, even though you're off in California. Who was convicted in federal court this week in New York and faces possible life sentence? Harvey Weinstein, Joaquin Guzman, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone.
Our buddy Manafort, isn't it?
Paul Manafort, yeah. No, Joaquin Guzman.
It wasn't Manafort?
No, They got us.
Wow.
No, I mean, of course, Paul Manafort is going to be sentenced to life, but of course it was El Chapo. Oh, boy, got suckered right in. See, you can't tell the difference between a drug-dealing terrorist and somebody who used to be the chairman of the Trump campaign.
Wow.
That was for you, Patrick. That was a freebie. All right, which big winner in the Grammy Awards this week was later announced as part of the Basilica Block Party lineup? Casey Musgraves, Childish Gambino, Beck, or Dua Lipa?
I only know two of them, and I don't think it's Beck, so I'm going to go Casey Musgraves.
Yeah, I saw this on the paper. Yeah, we got it right. It was Casey Musgraves. I don't know who that is. That's why I didn't talk about the story I was going to talk about the other day. Congress on Thursday approved a bill to avoid another government shutdown that approved how much money for border barriers? None. 1.4, 2.6, 5.7 billion. I thought it was 1.7 billion, but
yeah, I'm going to go, well, whatever that lowest figure was,
1.4. Me too. Correct. And 85% of people got this right. That's great. All right. Which member of the Minnesota, by the way, I wish they hadn't given him one dime for that thing. I'm going to hold that out for my outcry later. But which member of the Minnesota congressional delegation was the only one to vote against the border compromise bill? Do you know who it was that voted against it?
I know exactly who. Do you know?
No.
Ilhan Omar.
She did?
Yeah.
Ilhan Omar, I'm so proud that you are my congressperson. What company this week abruptly abandoned plans to open a second headquarters in New York? Was it 3M, Amazon, Google, Microsoft?
Amazon.
Amazon did. That's right. Boy, they're a promise broken, right? That company, aren't they? And a Santee County businessman, husband and hockey dad, was in the news this week for what? Shooting a puck into a foot-wide goal from the upper deck seats of the county's hockey arena in a video that went viral, being arrested by the Secret Service for credible threats against Donald Trump. Oh, boy. Donating $1 million to boost the area's hockey program for young girls, being arrested and charged in 1993 slaying of a woman in Minneapolis. Yeah. Okay, and a Santee businessman, husband and hockey dad, did one of these things. Made a miraculous puck on a video, or goal on a video, was arrested by the Secret Service, donated $1 million for girls hockey, or was charged in the slaying of a woman in Minneapolis.
I know this one because it was on the front page of the Star Tribune website. He actually murdered someone in 93.
Well, what? Okay, I didn't know that story. But you don't pick those other three options.
Yeah, well, those are two positive things he could have done.
Yeah.
He donated $1 million. He was in a viral video, and he killed someone.
Good grief! I was thinking. I mean, I was all over the place. I was cheering him on the girls' hockey. I'm like, don't become an assassin. Jeez. All right, what happened in Lindsay Vaughn's final race of her career? She withdrew the morning of the race, citing chronic knee pain. She crashed into the gates early in the course. She took the bronze, or she took the gold. I know this one. I'm a big Lindsey Vonn fan. Brett, I'm guessing you're busy with something else. She took the bronze is what I'm going with, and I'm right about that one. All right, question number 9 out of 10. Delta announced $1.3 billion in what this week? To build a wall around the Delta compound. No, that's not one of them. $1.3 billion in losses for 2018 calendar year. A profit-sharing payouts. Investment in new fuel-efficient A220 jets. Or cost cuts, including expected reductions of 5,000 workers. Brett, are you with me?
I am, yeah. I had a little housekeeping call we had to get to there.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Do you got any of those?
I didn't quite hear it, so I'm going to leave this answer to you.
All right. I don't know if they announced cuts, if they announced losses, if they're going to invest. I'm going to say loss. I'm going to say $1.3 billion. That's a big number. I'm going to call that investment in more fuel-efficient planes. No profit-sharing payouts. Jeez, once again, work for Delta. That's the money ticket. We picked wrong, Brett. We picked wrong. We should have just been working for Delta. NASA mourned the death this week of a 6-wheeled rover that explored Mars for 15 years, long after its original 90-day mission. Like the thing went for 90 days, stayed 15 years. That's like a brother-in-law that stays too long. What was its name? Spirit, Opportunity, Stayed All Night, or Insight?
Random guess, Stayed All Night.
No, I made that one up. It's not even one of them. It was Opportunity. It was Opportunity. We got that one correct. Hey, we did not do very well, my friend. 8 out of 10. I chunked us on those. Hey, but you know, you stay smart listening to AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Mark your calendars for March 2nd. We'll see you there. And this is Minnesota's Progressive Repartee on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota.